He thought it was an act of charity, a moment of pity for a woman he believed was beneath him. A billionaire, using his wealth to rescue a struggling black woman from her circumstances. He never looked her in the eye, never saw the fierce dignity burning behind her own pain. He was completely, tragically unaware that the child she carried, the one he assumed was the reason for her desperation, was his own. His single, forgotten night was now a living, breathing secret. And when the truth finally surfaced, his entire world would shatter. Her name was Lena, and before the world turned cold, her life was filled with melody. A gifted jazz singer, her voice was once the soul of a vibrant downtown club. Now, the music had faded, replaced by the silent, overwhelming weight of her pregnancy. She walked the same streets she once owned under spotlight, now just another invisible face. The father, a man from a single, whirlwind night months ago, was a ghost, a memory she'd tried to lock away. She focused only on survival, on building a fragile new life for the two of them, completely unaware that the man whose brief, passionate presence had started it all was the same one whose empire cast a shadow over her entire neighborhood. He was closer than she could have ever imagined, and their paths were about to collide not as lovers, but as stranger and charity case. The collision happened on a rain-slicked street, under the gray canopy of a city that had forgotten its color. Lena was on her way to a final, crucial job interview, the one chance she had to secure stability before her baby arrived. A delivery truck, speeding to make a light, swerved and clipped the side of a luxury sedan that had been idling near the curb. The sound of crunching metal was sickening. From the sedan emerged a man, his face a mask of cold fury even before he assessed the damage. This was Elias Thorne, a name synonymous with power and property in the city. His eyes, sharp and dismissive, swept over the scene, bypassing the terrified truck driver entirely. They landed on Lena, who had frozen on the sidewalk, a mere bystander clutching her folder of resumes. "You," he stated, his voice cutting through the drizzle. "Did you see this? I need a witness." People like him, he gestured contemptuously at the truck driver, are a menace. "But I suppose you stick together, don't you?" The assumption was a physical blow. He had grouped her with the driver based on nothing but the color of their skin, casting her as an unreliable accomplice in a crime she didn't commit. Before she could form a word of protest, he was on his phone, barking orders to his lawyers and insurance company, weaving a narrative of a coordinated incident. Days later, a formal notice arrived at Lena's tiny apartment. It was a lawsuit. Elias Thorne's legal team, in their investigation, had somehow found a record of her presence, not as a witness, but as a potential co-conspirator. The claim was absurd, a grotesque display of power meant to intimidate. Her job prospect vanished the moment the company heard she was entangled in legal trouble. Destitute, desperate, and facing a legal battle she could never afford, Lena was backed into a corner. The only path forward was the most humiliating one imaginable. Swallowing a pride that felt like shards of glass, she walked into the towering edifice of Thorne Industries. She wasn't there as the talented singer she was, or even as the expectant mother she was. She was a supplicant. She was directed to a charity foundation the billionaire occasionally patronized, a photo-op initiative for disadvantaged mothers. She stood in line, her heart pounding a rhythm of shame and fury. When she finally reached the front, there he was. Elias Thorne, surrounded by aides and cameras, ready to perform his act of benevolence. He didn't recognize her. Not from the street, and certainly not from the night they had shared. His gaze was distant, impersonal. He held out a mock ceremonial check, a pittance that wouldn't cover his car's detailing, as a photographer's flash went off. He was saving the poor, black, pregnant woman, immortalizing her humiliation as a trophy of his own generosity. And as he handed her the check, his eyes briefly dropped to her pronounced belly, a flicker of something, pity, perhaps, or disdain, crossing his face. He had no idea that the child he was silently judging was the only heir to the empire he was so proudly pretending to be charitable towards. The charity event was a gilded cage of whispers and false smiles. Lena endured it, the phantom weight of the ceremonial check burning in her purse. But as Elias Thorne took the podium to accept accolades for his philanthropy, something in Lena snapped. The injustice, the humiliation, the sheer weight of his ignorant power, it became too much to carry silently. She walked toward the stage, her movements calm and deliberate, a stark contrast to the storm in her eyes. The event organizers tried to gently steer her away, but she was unstoppable. She stepped into the circle of light at the foot of the stage, looked up at the bewildered billionaire, and spoke, her voice clear and resonant, carrying the melody of a pain he could never compose. "You sue me for an accident I didn't cause. You rob me of my future with your baseless accusations. And now, you stand here, giving me pennies and calling it salvation while your lawyers try to destroy me." A stunned silence swallowed the room. Elias's face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "This is neither the time nor the place for your hysterics," he declared, his voice dripping with condescension. "Security. The time and place was 5 months ago, Mr. Thorne," Lena said, her voice dropping, yet cutting deeper than before. "At the Monarch Hotel. Suite 1122. You left before sunrise. You never asked for my name." The blood drained from Elias's face. The memory, a forgotten indiscretion, now crashed into the present with devastating force. His eyes, wide with dawning horror, flicked from her steady, knowing gaze down to her pregnant belly. He did the math. The timeline was perfect. The charity case, the woman he had so carelessly accused and patronized, was carrying his child. The empire he built, the legacy he was so proud of, had just been irrevocably shattered by the one person he believed was beneath his notice. The lawsuit vanished overnight. A substantial, anonymous trust fund was established in Lena's name, more than enough to secure her and her son's future. But this was not a fairy tale ending. It was a settlement, a transaction to purchase silence and absolve a guilty conscience. Elias Thorne's world did not crumble, but it was permanently, quietly, altered by the shadow of his own actions. Lena, however, found a different kind of power. She used the resources she was given not just for security, but for purpose. She became a fierce advocate for mothers facing systemic prejudice, her voice, once silenced, now amplified by her pain and her triumph. This story is not about a billionaire's salvation. It is about a woman's resilience in the face of a profound, dehumanizing bias. It exposes how prejudice isn't always a loud shout, it is often a quiet assumption, a dismissive glance, a system weaponized without a second thought. Elias saw a stereotype, not a person, until he was forced to see the piece of himself he had so carelessly left behind. He was given a chance to be a father, but he could never erase the truth. His first instinct, when he held all the power, was to break her. So we are left with a question that lingers long after the screen fades: how many people have you looked past, judged, or underestimated, never stopping to consider the profound, human story you are too privileged to see? The greatest injustice is not always in the action, but in the blindness that precedes it.